All right, thanks everybody for coming today. I'm going to be introducing Ava Langer. Ava has been a dear, dear friend of our family for a long time. We met the Langers in 2007 when they moved to Alabama for 1 year. During that time, she and Claire were both a year old. Who would have thought here we would be on this day at Front Range graduating and doing senior capstone, and then I get to introduce you. So not only do I work here, but I just know her so well. I talked to a few people, some other your classmates, and we came up with some list of virtues that we see in you, and that I'm sure you're going to see throughout her capstone speech. One of those is your steadfast pursuit of God and a love for his word. The other is that you're curious, very curious, that you engage others in meaningful relationships, that you're committed to truth, that you're discerning, and most importantly, you're adventurous, like no one I've ever known, really. So everybody, please give a hand of applause to Ava. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself hiking a mountain alone, trying desperately to reach the top with no one around. No friends or family to talk to or laugh with or to encourage you. Now picture yourself finally reaching the top. You have no one to celebrate with you. No one to give you a high five, congratulate you, or just share the experience. You don't even have cell service because you're in the middle of nowhere, and so calling someone isn't an option. You're all alone. Now try to imagine the opposite. Having your best friends there beside you the entire time. Finally reaching the top of the mountain after hours of hard work and having a community to share your joy. Friends and family that have encouraged you to keep going when things are hard and have created laughter and shared memories along the way. You can open your eyes now. For most of us, one of these two scenarios seems to be filled with significantly more joy than the other. For my capstone project, I explored the importance of community, specifically in adventure, and asked the question, is there more joy to be found in adventure when it's done in community with others? Or can you find just as much or more joy when you adventure alone and spend the time with God? I started out this year strongly believing that there is more joy in adventuring with friends, and I was pretty closed-minded to the fact that I might be wrong. But lo and behold, I found throughout my year of research that I was very wrong. I realized that you can find joy no matter what you're doing, as long as you're pursuing the Lord. If you're pursuing joy itself, you're not going to find it, because joy is not the ultimate objective. God is. From this, I also learned that the more time you spend pursuing God, the more joy you'll start to find in it. At the beginning of this year, I conflated joy and happiness. What was the difference, really? Sure, I had heard things like, joy is more than happiness. We can have joy even in the middle of suffering when you probably aren't very happy. Joy is long-lasting and happiness is short-lived. Joy comes from the Lord and happiness can come from the world. But deep down, if I really was honest with myself, I didn't understand the difference or really how to find joy rather than happiness in my everyday life. Over the course of this year, I learned the difference, all while pursuing adventure. When I was given the capstone prompt at the beginning of the year, what do you love? I soon came up with, I absolutely love adventure. I love the outdoors, I love exercise, I love exploring this beautiful world that God has given us. When I think about the moments in my own life that have been most joyful and life-giving, almost all of them include some sort of adventure. For example, mountain biking up Vail Mountain with my dad while it's pouring rain, or four-wheeling in Moab with my family, or spending hours upon hours on a lake with my friends. Not only do these moments include adventure, but they include other people as well. So I started wondering, do I need people around me while I'm in God's creation or in my adventures to ensure that I really experience joy? Or is there something innate about adventure that provides me with that joy? Because if you imagine yourself going camping completely and utterly alone, that's much different than going on a rafting trip with some of your best friends. At the beginning of the year, being a person that likes people, I thought that the latter had the potential to bring significantly more joy than the other. I mean, who wants to go camping by themselves, right? Personally, I would have much preferred to go with all my friends, and many of you would probably feel the same way. But why? This year, I've undertaken the task of digging deeper into this topic. I started out by interviewing a Christian man named Bass Bauman, who is a nomad. He lives and works out of his truck and spends his time traveling the mountains. He does a lot of adventures with other people, but the majority of it is spent alone. I asked him about his thoughts on solo adventure and why he does it in an attempt to understand why he would choose to spend so much of his time by himself. He told me that it is a good chance to spend time with the Lord, and it produces spiritual growth in a way that little else does. He said, I find that solo outdoor adventure, in particular, has allowed for connection and communion with God, as well as personal growth, which has been really, really rewarding. He argued that connecting with other people is extremely important, but that connecting with God is even more so. While I listened to Bass speak, I was struck by his love for solo adventure and his reasons behind it. I thought about my own adventures and how, with friends, I hadn't necessarily spent time intentionally pursuing God. Was I distracted by other people? Did I care too much what they thought of me? It was the first time that I realized that there might be different purposes in different kinds of adventuring, and that maybe the aim of solitude should be to spend time with God. I had read the book Into the Wild just before this interview and had seen solo adventure in a much different way. Into the Wild is a biography about a man named Chris McCandless, who traveled solo for 2 years before eventually dying in the Alaskan bush. The book briefly touches on God, but doesn't dive into the subject, instead portraying McCandless's motivations to be a desire for nature and simplicity, independence, and an escape from societal pressures. In contrast to McCandless, Bass portrayed a desire to just spend time alone with God. This intrigued me, so I set out to see if I really believed what Bass had to say. But first, I pursued community adventures because, after all, wasn't that where I was going to find the most joy? In September, my little brother Levi and I determined to hike a 14er before school one day. And here are a few pictures of that trip. We drove up to the trailhead the night before and slept in the car. We set an alarm for 3:30 and started hiking long before the sun came up. After getting lost in the dark a couple of times, we made it almost to the top before having to turn around, unfortunately, due to Levi's worsening condition of altitude sickness, and returned to school on time. This trip was an incredible time of growth for both my brother and I, and remains one of my favorite memories. We faced challenges that we had to overcome, that forced us to problem solve and push past our limits. We overcame fear by doing something new without parents, and we grew in patience with and love for one another. I absolutely loved this trip and definitely want to do it again sometime. As other experiments, I did multiple trips to Oak Creek and Buena Vista this year with my friends and family. And here are a few pictures from those trips there. These adventures, we spent these adventures ice skating, skiing, sledding, and just having fun. These adventures helped me get to know my friends and family more deeply and built trust between us. They also challenged me to think about my own physical limitations and learn and grow and get better at the things we were doing. These experiences were so much fun, and their memories are some of my favorites. All of these things I did with people, my community that I know and love, and it was amazing. I look back on these memories with fondness, and I look forward to making more in the coming years. As time goes on, I have people next to me to remind me of the ways I've grown through these adventures, the ways I've seen God work, and the challenges that I've overcome. My friends aren't going to let me forget where I've come from. The goodness in adventuring with those you love is that you have people next to you with shared memories and experiences to remind you of the things you've learned, encourage you, keep you accountable, and remember together the beauty that you've experienced in God's creation. We have been purposefully created to be relational beings. God said in Genesis 2:18, "It is not good for man to be alone." Now, this is not saying that it is not good that a person should ever be by himself, but that we were deliberately designed to be relational beings, to build relationships and friendships, and to live in community with one another. There are countless examples in the Bible of deeply good friendship. Ruth and Naomi, David and Jonathan, Paul and Timothy, and many more. We can see that through good and bad, these friends protect each other, encourage one another, sacrifice for one another, and remind each other of who God is and what He has done in their lives. Shared experiences cultivate this kind of friendship in a way that little else does. And I would urge you to get outside and do something crazy with your friends if you never have. But after experimenting with shared adventures, I moved on and did the hard kind of adventuring. Solo adventuring. To see if what Bass had told me would really prove true. To start, I went backpacking alone for 2 nights last fall. And here's a few pictures that I took while I was doing that. As I walked, the birds chirped and the deer grazed next to me. At first, it all seemed so magical. But by that evening, though, it got cold and dark, and I began to feel terribly alone. Clouds rolled in, and it started to rain. Everything just started to feel dull and eerie. The dead trees loomed above me, and the deer that had before brought me such joy seemed to be staring at me, watching intently with unblinking eyes. Every snap of a branch made my heart beat faster. I fell asleep that night thinking, if only I had someone with me right now, everything would be better. And the second night was even worse. It rained on me, I was tired and lonely, and I almost quit. I really did, I almost quit. But I endured. My goal going into that trip was to seek and find joy. I was trying to figure out if I could gain as much joy from a trip alone as I could with friends. I was expecting the answer to be no, and I was right so far. But I had done something hard. I had overcome my fears, and I had stretched my understanding of what I was capable of doing all by myself. At the midpoint of this whole project, I finally started asking the question, what exactly is joy? I started to realize that joy is not just a feeling we get when we do something fun or when we spend time with friends. That is happiness. Philippians 4:4 says, "Rejoice in the Lord." I started to find that joy is not just an emotion, but is a characteristic of a life spent in pursuit of the Lord. So yes, God gives us nature in which to adventure. Yes, he gives us friends and family to build relationships with. He gives us bodies that we can climb mountains with. He gives us hearts and minds that hold memories and feelings. He gives us the sunsets and the trees and the rivers and everything good in our lives. Yes, every good and perfect gift is from above. Amen. He has given us these things for our enjoyment, and yes, they are certainly good. But the more and more time I've spent thinking about what joy is, the more I've realized that in the end, these things will always fall short unless we are looking for God in them. Joy comes from delighting in the Lord and what he has given us, and is founded and rooted in a choice to glorify God with our lives. My solo backpacking trip was not as joyful as it could have been because my mind was not in the right place. I was seeking joy itself when I should have been seeking God. Because joy is not the ultimate objective. God is. The aim of solo adventure should be to spend time alone with God. When solitary adventure and solitude are used to focus on the Lord, that is where joy is found. This can be praying, reading the Bible, journaling, or just worshiping. The point is to try to listen to what God is trying to teach you. One of my favorite verses these days is Psalm 46:10, which says, "Be still and know that I am God." Solo adventuring is one of the perfect places to just be still and pursue the Lord. I have learned throughout this year that the more habitual you make this, the more time you spend in solitude, intentionally pursuing time with the Lord, the more joy you'll start to find in it. I have found that as I've personally spent more and more time reading the Bible, praying, and reflecting, the closer I've grown in relationship with the Lord, and the more I've wanted even more of it. From August until now, my faith has grown considerably. Over the last few months, I've started to regularly read the Bible, pray, and spend intentional time with God. The more I've done it, the more I've enjoyed it. This spring, I did another solo experience, but this time was much different than the first. I went into this trip longing just for some time with the Lord. I put away all technology and entertainment and spent a weekend in silence and solitude, with only a Bible, notebook, pen, and a few books on prayer. Looking back on both of my solo experiences this year, the latter brought me so much more joy than any trip with friends could have. I have never enjoyed prayer and studying the scriptures more than I did that weekend, and the lessons I took away from my time there are priceless. So the answer I found to my question of solo versus community adventure is this: one does not bring more joy than the other. Instead, time alone and time in community are both wonderful and have the potential to bring joy, but the discerning factor is, what am I pursuing? When I really pursue God versus just happiness, relationships, or new experiences, I will find joy whether I'm with people or alone. Ultimately, nature and adventure, solo and community time, can all bring joy because God has given us these things for our delight. But we weren't created to seek joy itself. We were created to seek God, and joy comes from that. So I urge you, pursue the Lord in your adventures, because that is where joy is found. Thank you.